Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this Achates live session on Thursday, the 12th of February. Today, we are going to be discussing capital fundraising. My name is Jacoba Bruneel, and I am a consultant at Achates, and I'm joined today by my colleague Phoebe Walker, Achates Senior Consultant. We are a consultancy providing support to cultural organisations with fundraising, recruitment, strategy, organisational change planning, and impact evaluation. We take our name from Greek and Roman mythology. Achates was a close friend and loyal advisor to Aeneas, so we think our name quite neatly describes the relationship that we offer to our clients within the cultural sector. Achates Life was set up to really support the sector, bringing fundraisers and other arts professionals together to discuss key topics and also to enable you to help and support each other. Whilst we obviously acknowledge that Achates doesn't necessarily have all the answers, what we absolutely do have is an overview of the sector itself, and we are incredibly passionate about using this perspective and role in a supportive way. It's worth saying that all of the information shared in today's conversation is, of course, correct at the time of broadcast. Today's session, as I mentioned, will be focused on capital campaigns, and my colleague Phoebe will chair a discussion with our two brilliant panelists. So I'm delighted to hand you over to her to welcome our guests who will be exploring this topic with us today. Over to you, Phoebe.
Thank you, Jacoba, and welcome everybody. Capital is on the minds of many cultural organisations at the moment, not least because of central government's recent announcement of a £1.5 billion capital funding package for the arts and culture sector over a 5-year period up to 2030. This includes specific packages for museums, libraries and the heritage sector, as well as additional capital investment for Arts Council England national portfolio organisations. The announcement also covers the extension of Arts Council England's Creative Foundations Fund for a further 4 years, and the recipients of the first round of that fund will be announced by the end of March this year. Whether this announcement is directly relevant to your organisation or not, we know that many organisations across the sector are currently planning capital campaigns, seeking match funding for existing capital projects, or, with ever-growing financial pressures, scrutinising their campaign budgets afresh. With this in mind, today we'll be talking about some of the nuts and bolts of capital fundraising and campaign planning in the current fundraising landscape, and speaking to two panellists who are very much in the thick of this process. We're going to think about some of the key challenges to anticipate, including how you might approach managing the twin pillars of capital and revenue fundraising, as well as strategies you might employ to ensure your capital fundraising efforts are both manageable and effective. Capital funding, in brief, refers to any investment in buildings, equipment, digital infrastructure and technology. And of course, this covers everything from state-of-the-art, purpose-built centres for culture designed by world-famous architects to the less glamorous but undoubtedly crucial work of the maintenance and refurbishment required to ensure a building remains safe and fit for purpose, or overhauling an electronic payment system so that an organisation's shop or cafe, say, can continue to function. A 2025 report compiled by Arup and Future Arts Centres, which evaluates capital investment needs for arts centres in the UK, has found that many arts centre buildings are now facing increasing maintenance challenges with ageing infrastructure and growing financial pressures, making it harder for them to welcome communities consistently and enable organisations to operate at their full potential. And it's this last point that's really important. At Achates, we take a purpose-led approach to thinking about capital projects and capital fundraising, as we do with all our work. We advocate for an approach to capital project development which is founded on an understanding of how investment in our buildings and infrastructure can create impact and change for the audiences we are working with and for. When this is the case, the task of planning and delivering a capital fundraising campaign follows, if not easily, then at least more straightforwardly, with a firm grasp on the impact it will create for specific audiences underpinning the case for investment. So with this in mind, I'd like to introduce our two panellists today. We're delighted to be joined today by Jessica Cheetham from De La Warr Pavilion. Hi, Jessica.
Hi there, hello.
Hi. And we're also thrilled to be joined by Liz O'Neill, CEO of Z Arts. Hello, Liz. Jessica is Head of Development at De La Warr Pavilion in Bexhill-on-Sea, East Sussex, where she leads fundraising and strategic partnerships to support the organisation's artistic programme, heritage preservation and community impact. She is part of the senior team delivering the pavilion's major capital project and helped secure £7.6 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Jessica has a background in arts fundraising and theatre producing and is Chair of Trustees at Spun Glass Theatre, bringing arts experiences to family audiences in Hastings, East Sussex. Liz O'Neill has been Chief Executive of Z Arts for over 16 years. Z Arts is the UK's only dedicated arts centre for children and families, housed in a large Edwardian building, delivering over 100,000 creative interactions for children each year across all art forms. At Z Arts, she's managed some smaller capital projects, including refurbishing a studio theatre space and an Arts Council England funded programme to improve digital development in the building. Now she's in the early stages of a multi-million-pound capital project, working closely with the local authority who own the building. And I'd love to start by asking our panelists just to briefly introduce your building. You're obviously both building based. So introduce your building, your current capital project, maybe a little précis of the works being undertaken, and also the stage you're at in your kind of capital fundraising activity, your campaign planning. Jessica, if I could come to you first, please.
Sure. Thank you very much for that introduction. That was brilliant. So the Delaware Pavilion is a modernist building, a Grade 1 listed building in Bexhill-on-Sea in East Sussex. We have an auditorium, we have 2 galleries, we have a studio space, a learning space, and a cafe, restaurant, and shop. And we produce a huge artistic program that goes across all of those, and the capital project that we're working on is a £51 million plan over 3 phases to really restore, to fix all of the different problems within the building, but also to completely change some of the ways that we operate, how we've seen the different challenges and things, that it will really open up us being able to use the building in the best way for our communities to come in and take part in programmes and to run their own events, but also for us to be more sustainable as an organisation. We've got planning permission and, as you mentioned, a really excellent generous grant from National Lottery Heritage Fund, and now we're looking to kind of complete phase 1 and look to the kind of strategy for phase 2, which would be a new purpose-built sea-facing studio, as we're right on the promenade of Bexhill-on-Sea, to make the most of that really unique location there.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Jessica, for that really lovely kind of swift description of all the brilliant work that you're planning and you're undertaking. I think Liz might just be having some technical difficulties. I'm hoping she's going to be able to drop back in and join us. But until she's able to do that, if I may, Jessica, I'll kind of keep on with some questions about your capital campaign and your capital project as a whole. One of the things I wanted to ask before we kind of get into thinking about capital fundraising is about capital feasibility. So before you begin planning your capital fundraising campaign, you obviously want to do your best to establish the feasibility of that campaign. So questions like, what can you raise? What's the best approach to raising that? What's the likely timeline? What are the resources you need to kind of carry out that fundraising activity? I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about your experience to date in undertaking this kind of feasibility work at Delaware.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is one of the hardest steps, really getting it all off the ground and working out how you galvanise that first support, which means that you can kick into gear and move it along, because it's so technical. I think that we really benefited at Delaware Pavilion from historically having a really strong relationship with the local authority as the owners of the building, the charitable trust leases, the building from Rother District Council. So there's a real wealth of experience from their side of how you get really big capital projects going and off the ground. And there was a kind of unique opportunity with Levelling Up Fund from the central government. So we worked in partnership, really hand in hand with the local authority to make the case. But, you know, that really came from really in-depth knowledge of what that case for regeneration for Bexhill was going to be, and how Delaware Pavilion and the capital reinvigoration of that site, how that was going to really be impactful for Bexhill as a town, for Rother as a region, and it being this kind of cultural catalyst for growth and opportunity. So we were really lucky to be able to have that opportunity. And because we're an art centre that's in there all the time, operating it, running events every day, you really intimately know what the challenges are. I think it'd be different if you're looking to restart a site that's empty, or you're looking to build somewhere completely new. You'd have kind of different approaches, but there was a real sort of instinct of what we needed, where things could be optimized, where things could be moved around, so that the team could go forward and make that case really confidently.
That's brilliant, thank you. And thanks as well for kind of touching on that relationship with the local authority, which is, I think, such an important question for so many kind of building-based organisations undertaking capital, and it's one I think we'll come back to. Liz, hello, you've been able to rejoin us, I hope.
I think so.
Thank you for persevering. If it's okay, Liz, and you're settled there, I've just asked Jessica to give us a little bit more information about the building and the project, and I wonder if I could ask the same of you at Z Arts, if you could tell us just a little bit more about your amazing building and the project that you're undertaking, and maybe just at what stage you're at in that campaign planning. That would be great to hear.
Yes, and apologies for all of the technical issues.
Don't worry, we all have it.
Yeah. So Z Arts is a big Edwardian building. I will try and get a picture of it at the backdrop when I'm not speaking. Children's Art Centre, that's the UK's only dedicated children's art centre. It has a number of, like, 2 theatres and a gallery, cafe, music room, rehearsal room, dance studio, lots of different rooms. It's owned by the City Council. It was turned into an art centre for young people in 2000, but has had very little work done since then. So the capital, we've had a feasibility study completed for kind of REBA stage 1. And for the first time, the City Council, which are our landlords, are having conversations with us about turning that into a reality. So what we're focusing on primarily is accessibility, but it's still looking like, it's interesting. The actual capital works are around looking at about £7 million, but when you look at all of the additional costs, you can pretty much double that. So we're very much at the early stages. I've got a meeting coming up next week to see where we might get those funds from. So it might be from the City Council capital programme or their maintenance programme, and then there's fundraising on top of that. So I feel like we're juggling an awful lot of balls at the moment to see if we can get them all to land in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's common right throughout a capital campaign, but certainly in that planning stage, which you're in, where you're working out kind of what's possible, how it will be achieved, who you need to talk to, who the stakeholders are going to be. And Jessica has just been talking about the feasibility work that they've been undertaking, and obviously the significance of the local authority within that. And obviously that's very true for you as well, as you've mentioned. I wonder if you could just elaborate a bit on that relationship with the local authority. Obviously it's very significant for this conversation, but they're your landlords, aren't they? So you've got a kind of a long-term established relationship with the local authority, which presumably has kind of inflected all of your capital plans up to this point.
Yes, so I've had 2 smaller 2 or 3 smaller kind of capital interventions over the years. So we've refurbished a studio. This was sort of 10, 12 years ago. And that was Z Arts getting the funding from the Arts Council to do that. But we needed to have kind of authority from the City Council as landlords that we could do that. We also had other Arts Council funding to digitise all the lighting and improve the digital infrastructure. Again, we did that ourselves. So we're investing in a City Council owned building, but we're doing kind of raising the money and doing the works. There's a smaller one after COVID when we were looking at reopening. We had to redo all of the toilets on one of the levels. And again, we got the funding for that, and the City Council were very reluctant. They said, well, because we're not the clients, the City Council was saying, then if you find a problem like knocking walls down, you're responsible for that, not us. So there's been some tensions along the way. And I think what's currently a big challenge for us is that we've done this wonderful feasibility study around kind of enhancing the existing building. Our central lift is currently broken. We've got a lot of infrastructure like that that's end of life, which is why we're looking at this work. So as landlords, they've said, right, we're instructing someone to replace that lift. They wouldn't show us the specification to start off with. We just had a lift engineer turn up unannounced and unexpected, saying they were going to set up replacing the lift. Anyway, I managed to get hold of the specification and said, look, this isn't aligned with what we're wanting or needing as the users of the building. It's not set up for family users. It's just they hadn't considered or talked to us about what that specification was. So our biggest challenge at the moment is to get the maintenance team at the local authority to talk to the capital team, and both of them to talk to us as the clients and the end users. And so I think once I've managed to nail that, which is what our meeting's about next week, hopefully we can get everything aligned and all kind of working towards the same design and specification.
That's so interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And I think kind of that's really instructive for organisations looking at capital who are in a position where they have a landlord and the need for kind of that alignment to be really clear from the outset. And it's really interesting to hear about both your kind of different experiences with that kind of local authority stakeholder piece. I wondered, Jessica, if I could ask you, obviously they're a very important stakeholder for you, who else are the key stakeholders that are kind of in your orbit for this capital project, and who would you suggest you kind of maybe beyond some of the usual suspects, who are those people or those organisations that you really need to kind of be communicating with or kind of getting on the same page with at this sort of early point in the campaign?
Yeah, I think stakeholders are so crucial for these big capital campaigns. We started doing a bit of stakeholder mapping with the team at this point, where we're kind of looking at actually sort of starting to begin the works and how we communicate with everybody, and have ended up with an initial spreadsheet of about 300 organisations. And in conversation, that's only with about 6 or 7 team members in conversation going, these are the absolutely most important people. From a fundraising point of view, I think what I found really interesting is that, first of all, the nature of your building is going to open up some really key kind of nationally significant stakeholders that you wouldn't consider elsewhere. So like Historic England have been really key for us. 20th Century Society have been really key for us because, that we have a 20th century building, the like kind of cube modernist building, that also in conversation at the moment with Theatres Trust, these kind of big bodies that exist to advocate for you, and they're all, so approachable and lovely, and can really kind of help with those letters of support and things as you're going through those first stages and looking to prepare what you're going to put forward, what's within the project. and what's allowed within all the different listed building regulations and that kind of stuff. They're really, really helpful stakeholders. And the other thing in terms of actually the fundraising campaign that's been revealed to us is that there are so many people that have had really key relationships with the building, like all through its history. So we're currently working really closely with a group of people that in the 1990s were friends of the Delaware Pavilion, where there was another big, a previous big crisis moment and a big capital campaign. And they're really bringing such a wealth of experience and networking and connections in terms of how they went through the process of setting up the previous refurbishment. So I think they are really, really key stakeholders and hold a lot of that history and absolute love for the building, which really helps to then invigorate new people coming into your network and giving them that sense of the journey of the building throughout.
Thank you. That's amazing to hear about, kind of going back to those 1990s circle of supporters and bringing them, back into the moment of this capital project, which is so interesting. It kind of it speaks to me about the fact that these kind of, our buildings, our infrastructure, they're such a palimpsest of so many kind of different people, different supporters, stakeholders, all that kind of stuff, and all of that becomes, well, in various ways relevant when you're looking at another capital project and another kind of iteration of the life of the building and how the memory of the building is so important within that. Liz, there must be kind of, I think, a similar story with Z Arts. What would you say, kind of from the perspective of kind of other stakeholders that are really significant for you to be thinking about and that you're engaging or planning to engage? What do those groups look like for you?
Yes, absolutely. And for us, it's very much about the users of the building and the local community and the neighbours. So we're situated in Hume, which is a district, one of the wards in Manchester that everyone feels a real strong connection with. And our building in particular, they feel a strong connection with, because Hume has been knocked down and rebuilt 3 times in the last 50 years. And our building, Z Arts, has been one of the very few that have stood the test of time. So we have real, elderly people that remember it when it was a church and kind of going back to a lot of kind of local love for it. So we're definitely engaging with all of the local people. But then also, as a children and family arts centre, everything that we do is led by the children and designed by the children, and we have a kids council. So whilst we're not anticipating them, or it wouldn't be appropriate for them to kind of design what we want for the capital works, it's definitely really important that we bring them on the journey with us, and that they are informed and they can influence in certain areas and really kind of get behind it. And like I say, so it's the neighbours, the public, the visitors, and the same as Jessica was saying, Theatres Trust, excellent. We're engaging with those, with Historic England, and then the Future Art Centres Network, which are really brilliant as a support network nationally. So and it's looking at where else. Greater Manchester Combined Authority as well, so the wider authorities, not just the immediate local authority.
Of course, thank you. That's a really kind of useful roster of all the stakeholders that it's so important to engage, keep on side, keep in conversation with, and of course the communities that you're serving that are using the building, that are going to benefit from the capital works, kind of at the forefront of that. And so I suppose thinking about that, obviously purpose is sitting at the root of everything. What the work is going to enable in terms of impact, why, the rationale being around the impact for those communities. I'm thinking about this as kind of capital becomes a sort of extension of your revenue case for fundraising, doesn't it? Kind of at roots, they're sort of following the same line. And certainly when we at Achates are working on capital fundraising strategies or feasibility studies, we're thinking about kind of capital and revenue in tandem. I'm wondering if I could ask you, and I'll come to you first, Jessica, about kind of about managing those twin strands of capital and revenue, and how you kind of maybe in that way think about them as, they're following the same course. There's a there's a joint narrative there, but obviously there are lots of competing priorities, particularly when you're thinking about kind of cultivating new capital funders. You're often looking at them to be revenue funders first, to cultivate a revenue gift, and then turn them into capital funders. So I wonder if I can ask about your experience there, capital and revenue, and kind of planning and managing the two intertwined streams.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is a huge juggle. I feel like we knew this kind of big capital project was coming up, and that we were planning for it and thinking about the pipeline for those trusts and foundations that will give those kind of larger amounts to capital. They are also often really key revenue funders. So it felt like a few years of kind of going, really making sure that we got a strategy for each one, and when the right time to kind of go to them is, and kind of keeping those relationships really clear as we were going through. There's one kind of I think that you need to sort of be really clear within your team as well, of what those priorities are, and when you can kind of call on funders to make the contributions at the right time. There's a trust down in East Sussex, the Chalkcliffe Trust. They have they're doing great work in terms of quickly delivering funding for arts and culture, and being quite responsive. And, we've been able to nurture a relationship with them over the years, so that we've actually had some quite frank conversations with them about capital and revenue needs, and found something that works for the trust and works for us to be able to support it. But they're great because they really understand that, as you say, these two priorities are going hand in hand. Like, for the capital project to succeed, we need to be strong in revenue. For our learning programs and everything to succeed, we need to do well on the capital project. So I think it really helps to find the funders that you can have those conversations with, and it takes take a long view with you of how to achieve it together. I'm also really looking to our community of supporters, whether that's people that donate when they buy a ticket, or our members, and then more closely our patrons, to make sure that we're giving them the right messages all along, and helping them to come with us on the journey. Because especially for members, if we're quite significantly changing what happens within the building for a couple of years, to really impress on them that their support is needed more than ever, really. So to make sure that membership is a really strong base to pull it through, and it's also an audience that you can communicate with really clearly about what you're doing, in as many different ways, lots of different opportunities for email and events and stuff to keep them coming through, and see that membership that they're giving, it is about supporting us through the change, and that's really valuable, so that we come out strong the other end of the capital campaign as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think kind of the point you make about, the program and the activities that are ongoing sort of during your campaign and during kind of the capital works themselves. I mean, at Achates, we advocate for that work, your campaign program, and then your opening program post capital works. We advocate for those being part of that capital project budget, because they are kind of, they are part of that whole piece of enabling the work to be carried out, and to bring your audiences with you, and to ensure that there's that kind of through line between, the consistent work of the organisation, of the building, and kind of the capital works being done to then get you to this more effective and more impactful point. So I think that's really useful to kind of to have emphasised there. Liz, could I ask you kind of the same question around sort of managing capital and revenue, thinking about them as these kind of hand in hand pieces? How are you kind of approaching that, anticipating that at Z Arts with your forthcoming project?
Yeah, it's the golden question, isn't it? Absolutely. And just sort of picking up on what Jessica was saying with those kind of certain trusts and foundations that there's one particular, for instance, that we know we've had a really good, strong relationship with over a number of years, who would also support capital. And then we had to make a judgment call as to, well, actually, we need the revenue support. Otherwise, if we haven't got that now, the capital will never happen. So that's what we've gone for most recently. We've chosen to ask them for more revenue support again, and may or may not regret that when it comes to actually we need to know whether we can get capital. So yeah, we'll see whether or not that was the right choice. But again, it's compounded by it being a local authority venue, and therefore ultimately it's going to be their project. So on the one hand, what they can invest in terms of from the local authority capital programme budget will be a great match to kind of get the ball rolling. But then when it comes to however much additional fundraising we need to do, then that's going to fall on Z Arts as the charity. And then those funders would be more inclined to fund kind of things that would then belong, obviously, to us as a charity. So fixtures and fittings and equipment, etc., rather than the infrastructure of the building itself. So we're looking at how we separate those out. We don't have any fundraiser on our team whatsoever. So it's myself and a creative manager who deal with all of the fundraising anyway. So, we're really, really lacking in that department, even in terms of revenue. And hopefully we'll be employing someone soon as a part-time fundraiser to support revenue. So I'm, again, at the moment, exploring whether we can get the City Council to support additional hours and days with that person so that we can add capital fundraising alongside that. And again, we're thinking about, well, do I want a separate capital fundraiser or someone who can do both? Or at least they need, because they're very different skill sets and different approaches, but they've absolutely got to be able to talk to each other and be part of the same fundraising campaign. So yeah, I wish I had the answers, Phoebe, for that one at the moment, but I haven't yet.
No, that's fair enough. And I think, yeah, we kind of never come to this with all the answers because there's never going to be a pat response for everyone. But I think we certainly, and certainly today, we're showing that there are strategies, considerations that you can kind of have in mind, approaches you can follow that certainly kind of make it easier and at least kind of remove some of those some of those thornier challenges, or ensure that you're anticipating them well ahead of time. And your point, Liz, about, you're in a team where you don't have a dedicated fundraiser, that kind of that requirement is sort of is devolving to you and one other colleague. And I'm wondering, just thinking about other organisations who may be watching this who are in a similar boat, don't have a dedicated fundraiser. What are the tasks, Liz, that you'd suggest when you're planning capital project and fundraising? What are the tasks that you need to kind of prioritize at the outset and then on an ongoing basis if you're working with this really small resource? I mean, obviously you've said there part of that is considering, bringing in more resource and having that as part of your capital project budget. But I'm wondering kind of what are the sort of what are the strategies do you think are useful to think about if you're operating with this very limited sort of fundraising capacity?
Yes, I think it's budget management as well, isn't it? It's looking at keeping all of that, a really close eye on that. What we have done as well, we've just launched a 5-year new strategic plan. And it's the first time we've looked at 5 years, and that's partly because at some point in those 5 years, the capital work will happen. And how do we plan for all of the different kind of expansions and developments as an organisation, including the capital work? And so within that, we've just shifted like the organisational structure so that the people that are going to be work on the bigger projects have got more time to do that. So although we're not still employing anyone new as yet, the roles and responsibilities have been shifted, only in a small way, but in enough to be able to add capacity. And it's also we've done so more people are stepping up and up with opportunities to grow even within the organisation. So actually the team are feeling really enthused and vibrant by the idea and the fact that they've all got kind of a bigger say and input into their own different areas. So we've got a new leadership team, then a management team, and everyone else is now part of a specialist support team. So even those that might have been kind of on a lower level within the organisation are feeling really empowered that they are contributing in some way. And so other than that, kind of trying to get further support, external support to backfill roles and then have a capital project manager on board for ZArts as well as for the local authority. It's how we can look at the structure that we have got to make sure that it's fit for purpose for the future.
That's brilliant to hear that you've done that work of sort of the internal organizational buy-in and empowerment. Actually, that's really brilliant to hear how you've been able to do that within the existing team structure. And Jessica, I know you obviously have you have a fundraising team at Delaware, but not enormous amounts of resource, obviously. How have you approached this this question of sort of managing that resource around capital, and kind of what are kind of some of the key strategies or sort of the things that you have prioritized kind of most urgently around the capital work within your team?
A few different things. So we did expand the team to bring in more capacity. I've kind of gone on a journey over the last 2 years, coming in as the sole fundraiser into the organisation and working with the external consultants, the arts fundraisers that we were working with as part of the Heritage Fund development stage. They're still with us and they're still working through me on those big strategic bids. But now we have a development manager on the team as well, so that she's brilliant. She's Susie. She can really look after the events and the individual giving and the membership and keep all of that really strong as we're going through. In terms of kind of support strategically and support for myself as we've been going through all that journey, something that has been really useful is establishing a steering group. So thinking about who might be able, either within your organisation, so there's quite a few trustees on our steering group at the moment who bring a real wealth of experience from other organisations that they've worked within. But we've also got a representative from the architect team. So we're working with Howard Tompkins. So their director, Lucy Picardo, has been extremely helpful because she's gone through it with so many other arts organisations like Theatre Clwyd and the Old Vic recently with the launch of their backstage building. So she has really brought a wealth of kind of informal guidance for me to kind of go look at this person, talk to that person. Is there an event that I can invite this trust to, and that kind of thing. So I would say to kind of look to who you've got your trustee board, even if they don't have a fundraising background, if they have perspective from kind of going through similar kind of big projects, and just how you position a campaign and communicate it and that kind of thing, and looking at the kind of strategy of it. But yeah, also just kind of it's always a once in a generation thing, isn't it, to go through these big capital projects. So working with the architects has been great because they do it all the time, and they can kind of bring that overview, and they've worked with the development teams of various different arts organisations. That was also a really great thing, that Lucy connected me with some key people within the teams that have gone through these capital projects. So just to kind of have a quick informal conversation and take some bits and bobs. That was really useful when we were looking at how we just communicate and kind of package up the capital project and communicate it in a way that is instantly understandable, because I think these are such big projects. You end up, somebody goes, tell me a bit about your capital project, and you just think like, oh gosh, where on earth to start, and end up saying something very technical about doors, or like reglazing windows and things like that. So yeah, that was really, really helpful to speak to other fundraisers. They really help to drill down into kind of what is it that you want to achieve, and what are you doing.
Thanks for that, Jessica. That's brilliant, and I'm so glad you raised the point about a steering group, and how you use your board members who you may not have thought of in other ways up to this point, but actually can bring in lots of relevant expertise from their professional life or networks that is really relevant to capital, and then also bringing in the other experts who are a big part of the project, the architects, onto that group, and really using that as a really important resource. I think that's such a significant point to make, and I do get that point about you can get really drowned in the detail and end up talking about toilets but actually you need to be able to convey the message much more kind of succinctly and powerfully, and again drawing on your own networks, talking to peers, and thinking about the external consultation you do when you're pulling together the case for support, I suppose, is really, really important. So that consultation piece, very, very significant. I wonder if I could go into maybe a couple of more sort of practically minded questions, following on from kind of our discussion about resources. I'm thinking about kind of managing a capital project budget, and obviously how that aligns with your capital fundraising campaign target, and obviously a capital project budget and a campaign target will not necessarily be the same number, but thinking about the challenge of rising costs, inflation, both when you're kind of planning that budget and planning your capital campaign, how are you kind of both managing that piece of planning and ensuring that that's kind of accommodated, and that you're not left in any kind of challenging situations when it comes to kind of communications with funders about the cost of things. Liz, I wonder if I could come to you on that first, around that sort of that budget setting piece and anticipating some of the challenges we certainly have at the moment around rising costs.
Yes, and that I'd have to give kind of a big up to Achates, actually, because it was using the template to think about all of the additional costs, like I say. So the feasibility that we had done came out. It's interesting. So we were saying, we're looking at like we thought we had a ballpark of 3 million when we thought we were going for the Arts Council Capital Fund. Was like a year or so ago. And then realised we weren't at all ready to do that, and it was going to be far too oversubscribed anyway. But the architects were looking at that as a sum. So they came back with the feasibility study that said, yes, it's 3.5 million, but you should also spend another 3 million on heating and ventilation and infrastructure. So I gave that feasibility study to the City Council, and I was okay. That's reasonable, and in my head, because I know that there's a separate kind of carbon neutral budget within the council. So I'm going, well, they can take that 3 million to deal with supporting the carbon neutral side of things. And then we're still looking at 3.5 million. But then when you look at all of the additional costs, now, whether that's inflation, which we've put in basically at a 3% increase, but year on year, so 3% on whatever the total, then the next year is that 3% on the last total. So, and looking at over 3 years at the moment is where we're looking, and that's compounded as well for us, because we're lucky on the one hand that the way that the building is structured, that we're anticipating we don't have to close the whole building for a period of time. So we're trying to remain open through the whole period, which is going to be much better for us in terms of just keeping everybody connected and still delivering the work. And I know, there's I've seen a lot of examples where people will close the building for a year to do capital works, and then regaining your audiences and your visitors afterwards has been challenging. So whilst that's our preferred method, it does mean that it's going to cost more and it's going to take longer. So therefore, the kind of, like you say, the inflation and additional costs need to reflect that. So that will then come back in when we do the kind of the next design phase with the architects. But I suppose my big lesson is that the figures that the architects give you aren't the total figures that you're going to be needing to fundraise for, and making sure that you've got all of the other areas, including the backfill, like Jessica was talking about, all the other people that she's brought on in order to make that work. You've got to find the funds for them somewhere as well. So yeah, there's a lot more to think about than just what the architects give.
Yeah, absolutely. And that initial budgeting process is so important. And so you've got kind of, you have the construction costs, but you've got the kind of the non-construction costs, you've got the program costs, the resourcing, all included there. Jessica, kind of same question. I wonder how kind of you've approached that sort of the setting of the project budget and then kind of tailoring the fundraising campaign target to that, and how those things have talked to each other. And also, I know obviously you've got that large HLF grant, so that kind of really detailed work will have gone into that. I know. So what's your kind of experience been there?
I think the key thing that we've done to help mitigate against the rising costs and inflation is actually to phase the project. So it was originally going to be delivered just as a single capital project, and those were the conversations that we began with National Lottery Heritage Fund once we were in receipt of that levelling up funding to kick it all off. Through all of that development time that you have with Heritage Fund, where they give you a grant to kind of go through some of those initial design stages and to prepare your application, it was clear that, as you look at the costs and things, that it was going to be higher. And I think that is the experience of almost every capital project over the last few years. So I think that the project management team, they made a really shrewd strategic call to phase it so that then you can continue to talk to funders and supporters in manageable chunks, because even £1 million, with that is such a huge amount of money compared to what we normally deal with. So when it's then multiples of millions, people get a bit sort of like you can't quite compute, and funders or supporters think you want their contribution to be meaningful into the gap that you're raising. So we are really thinking about those different phases as separate projects. It'd be fantastic if we can keep rolling. We've got planning permission for the full master plan for the full 3 phases, but we just can, at least then there's digestible stories, and you can feel that parts of it are being achieved before you need to go out and find the next kind of big strategic block of funding to come in for each phase.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that phasing point, as you say, it can be a really shrewd decision in lots of ways, kind of making a project more manageable. Also, as you say, making that fundraising campaign and your messaging and the case about the impact of the investment for funders and supporters really kind of clear and targeted. Absolutely. I think we're about coming to the end of our session now, which is a shame, because I know there's so much we could continue talking about with 2 such brilliant, fascinating projects on the table here. But I'm just going to wrap up. Thank you both so much again, and I'll hand back over to my colleague Jacoba to finish up.
Thank you, Phoebe, for chairing, and we'd of course like to say a huge thank you to our panelists for a really thought-provoking and important discussion. Thank you so much, Jessica and Liz. And of course, we wish you the best of luck with the rest of your exciting capital projects. As you know, here at Achates, we offer a range of services to help you get the most out of your fundraising. And if you would like to discuss how we might be able to support you, or if you'd just like to speak to a member of our team, then please do just drop us a line at info@achates.org.uk. There is also a dedicated capital fundraising module, including a session on how to calculate the true cost of your capital project, with a template that Liz mentioned, which is available on Achates Community. That is our support and learning platform for the cultural sector charity employees. So if you'd like any more information about how you can access that platform, along with many more resources available, please do get in touch. And finally, just to note that our next Achates Live will be broadcast in April. There will be more details to follow on that soon, of course, so do keep an eye on your inbox. Just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you back with us again soon. Bye for now.